I'm leaving, and this guy, this former employee of mine, he comes running out. And at that time, there was a string of supervisors that had been getting shot, not just in South Florida, but different places. And I'm thinking, there's nobody out here. Oh, my God, he's going to shoot me. This is it. And I really was terrified.
Yeah.
And he comes up to me and he says, I know I wasn't always the best employee, but I really admire and respect your leadership, and I wanted you to know before you left.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, thank you. But I was still like looking over my shoulder like,
Are you going to shoot me now?
Is this a setup? But that was huge. And I will always remember that because I did not allow his reaction to change how I dealt with him. I continued to look for and work to bring out the good in him and how we could move our department and organization forward.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore. And in this episode, I speak with Katrina Rolle, President and CEO of the Community Foundation of North Florida. From her days as a varsity cheerleader and student government president at Miami Carroll City High School, to continuing her family legacy at Tuskegee University and working her way through the University of Florida Law School, even though it was against the rules, Katrina has always found a way to get things done. She dreamed of owning a business at age 14 while working at Burger King, and gained valuable experience as a cost accountant with Honeywell and as a supervisor with Florida Power and Light. But it was her 11 years staying at home with her children and volunteering in the community that led to offers to be CEO of the United Way of the Big Bend, and most recently, the Community Foundation. Katrina and her husband, Dr. Gary Rolle, were reluctant transfers to Tallahassee, but are now grateful to have invested their lives in the community where they raised their children and are proud to call home. We started our conversation talking about how the Sanford, Florida native who grew up in Miami ended up at an HBCU in Alabama.
Interesting story. So my late mother went to Tuskegee, and her parents did not go to college. And my grandfather told her, you're going to that school that Booker T. Washington built. She did not even see it before she was put on a train as a freshman to go to school. My grandparents did not see it until she graduated. And so we would go back. She would take us back for homecomings and for Founders Day events and different things. And she was president of the Tuskegee Alumni Club in Miami.
So she had a great love for the school.
A really great love for the school.
Yeah.
And so my sister, who's 3 years older than me, she went first. And then I would go up and visit and meet people. And so it was just it was home. It felt like home. And I applied and I got accepted. And I had a really great 4 years at Tuskegee.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think most people's experiences, mine was like to come to Florida State. I had never been on campus, had no connection to campus.
Yeah.
It was a completely foreign place that I had to adjust to. What a cool experience to feel like you're going home to a place that you had grown up with.
Yes.
And now it was going to be yours.
Yeah, my freshman dorm was just one of the same dorms that my mom lived in when she was in school there.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. So you enjoyed those years out? Your college experience was good for you? I
absolutely enjoyed them. I think that's where a lot of dreams were made, like about my future, a lot of friendships. Actually, my three sisters and I were going back to Tuskegee's homecoming next month.
You studied business administration, right? What was your goal? Did you have a plan for that when you graduated?
A little embarrassing, but even though my parents were college educated and they actually had masters, but they had masters in education, we didn't really talk a lot about that. I don't remember talking a lot about careers. And so I started working at 14. My first job was at Burger King. And back then, you could work at age 14, but you had limited amount of hours. And I had other jobs in high school as well. And so I said, I'm going to major in business because I want to make money and maybe one day own or run a business. That is how I picked my major. It was not a lot of really good thought given to it.
That makes some sense.
For back then, maybe, but now, kids like you talk to them and they're really doing a little research and all this other stuff.
They have a whole map planned out for
It was
them.
None of that for me. It's like business means making money and owning or running a business. That's why I majored in business.
Okay, well that makes some sense, but it wasn't part of it. The strategy kind of ended there, right?
Yeah, that was it. That was the strategy.
All right. So what happened after you graduated?
So when I graduated, I took a job as a cost accountant with Honeywell in Minneapolis. And interestingly, someone said to me, "I can't believe you're moving up there. It's super cold from South Florida." Now, Alabama winters were major for me coming from Miami. And I said, if I can deal with an Alabama winter, I can deal with the Minnesota winter.
I'm guessing you were wrong.
Oh, boy, was I wrong. And I'll remember that Labor Day. I only stayed there for a year, but it dropped down to the 40s, and it just kept dropping, and it kept dropping. And so there was one day, really bad weather, but I volunteered to be a junior achievement. You kind of work with the kids. I forget what the title.
Yeah.
And it was a Saturday, and I was going and didn't check. It was closed. And then I had a hair appointment later, and I said, well, I'll just go to that. The salon was closed. And I said, well, I'm just going to go to the library and hang out, because sometimes I would just pick things I wanted to research. It was open, and then I went to the grocery store, and when I got home, they said, again, we repeat, stay inside unless you have to be outside. I'm like, it's like 2 o'clock. I've been out since 8 o'clock. What are they talking about? Because it was so cold that day.
Right.
But I stayed there for a year, and it was definitely, I've never experienced that cold before. It would be 30 below, and sometimes when they're like, the high is 0, I'm like, yes. A South Florida girl saying yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's no good for anybody.
No.
But much less somebody from South Florida.
Yeah. But there's some super nice people in, I'm going to say Midwest, because I did an internship at Pontiac Motor Division one year. And they're no more now. And so still have a couple of friends from that time and that experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a good experience.
Yeah. The Midwest is a different tempo, different vibe, I guess, than Florida, for sure.
Well,
so it's good to experience that.
And it certainly Minnesota was, because, coming from Miami, obviously it's a different environment. It's, multicultural, but also when you think about awareness of crime. So, true story.
People up there, they don't lock their doors, nothing.
Not then. I did, but they didn't. And that was we would go to sleep at night and not lock their doors. And I remember going to a club, and I didn't know this woman. And she said, well, young lady, because we were in our 20s. And she's like, can you watch my purse for me? And I'm like, okay. But now she disappears and doesn't come back for a while, but I can't dance because I don't want to leave her purse. Right. And I'm thinking, well, who asks a stranger to watch their purse, right? But this is the kind of trust, at least back then, that they had. I don't know how it is now.
All right. So I saw you also worked for a utility company.
Florida Power and Light. So a year in Minnesota in that winter, I said, I can't live like this. Even though I like the people here, I can't live like this. It's just so cold all the time. So I applied for and got a job with Florida Power and Light in Miami. And I was on a program called the BBA program. It was a Bachelor of Business Administration. It's almost like a supervisory track position, if you will, but they don't guarantee that you will get in supervision, but you have an opportunity to get into supervision. So it's a one-year program where I got exposed to different areas of the customer service. It's like the meter readers, the collectors, the cashiers, the reps, everything that dealt with that component of Florida Power and Light. Even went out with some of the engineers who did the utility audits, when somebody comes in to see if your home is efficient. Right? Yeah. And I was off for a couple of months before I got interviewed and received an offer to be a supervisor. And so it was very interesting because I was younger than anybody that I supervised, and there have been people there for 20-plus years. I think Florida Power and Light did an excellent job in training. There was a lot of training for supervisors, and had to prove my worth to my employees, right? But I think I did a great job, and I stayed there almost 3 years before making the decision to go to law school. And it was a tough decision because I got accepted. I only applied to 2 schools, University of Miami, the night program, because if I went there, I was going to have to work, and University of Florida. Didn't want to drive all the way up to FSU. And that's the only reason I didn't apply to FSU. It was just, to me, that was back then the speed limit was 55, and it was a 9-hour drive.
Took too long.
Right. And so, anyway, just as I was making the decision and getting ready to make my announcement that I was leaving, I was offered 2 different promotions, and I had to really think through that. My mom was like, why are you doing this? There are a lot of hungry lawyers. You got this company that really likes you. Why don't you stay here?
Yeah.
And I didn't go to law school to practice law. Remember, I told you I wanted to either run or own a business, and I felt like having a law degree would help me in whatever that business was. I didn't know what it was. I still had this urge.
Okay.
And another reason why I accepted that position with Florida Power and Light is I wanted to learn how to manage people before I owned or ran a business. And so, again, that training was incredible. Incredible.
Yeah. Interesting that I know that it's tough to win over people. You know, it's your job to supervise, but they've been there forever. They're older. There's probably a little resentment, like, who is this new person? And dealing with that and doing that successfully, those are great lessons learned there, right?
Absolutely. You know, what I tried to do, there were 2 employees in particular that were more challenging. And one of them, I tried to look at the talents and what each person could bring to the team. And he was really good with people, and he was really good at presenting. So I would have him give some presentations. And I supervised that group for 2 years, and then Florida Power and Light centralized all of their customer service operations. And I really thought this guy, and his wife would come and pick up this check, and she would give me these really dirty looks. And the day that I was leaving, and Florida Power and Light was really gracious. They gave me a typewriter as my gift to go to law school, right? This is
nice.
I'm probably telling my age, but yeah, it was an electric typewriter.
Did it have the correcting tape?
Yeah, it did. It had the correcting tape.
Okay.
And so anyway, I'm leaving, and this guy, this former employee of mine, he comes running out. And at that time, there was a string of supervisors that had been getting shot, not just in South Florida, but different places. And I'm thinking, there's nobody out here. Oh, my God, he's going to shoot me. This is it. And I really was terrified.
Yeah.
And he comes up to me and he says, I know I wasn't always the best employee, but I really admire and respect your leadership, and I wanted you to know before you left.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, thank you. But I was still like looking over my shoulder like,
are you going to shoot me now?
Is this a setup? But that was huge. And I will always remember that because I did not allow his reaction to change how I dealt with him. I continued to look for and work to bring out the good in him and how we could move our department and organization forward.
That's awesome. You can't control him, but you can control you.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. And also a great lesson that you can have impact on people even if it doesn't look like you're not.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Because you don't know.
That's
Well, that's
right.
awesome. That's really cool that he went out of his way to not shoot you first, but secondly to share that with you.
Yes.
All right. So now you're at law school, right? So that's a tough challenge too.
Yeah.
And so what were those years like? What was law school what you thought it was going to be? Were you happy you made that decision as you were doing it?
Yeah, I was pretty careful about making the decision because I was putting myself through law school. And I visited UM and UF both. I wanted to see, were students getting jobs out of their career resource center? How many students? What are those percentages? Sitting on some classes, trying to get an idea of whether or not I can see myself there. And so when I went to University of Florida, I had spent 3 years really paying off debt in my car note, so I didn't have a ton of savings, but I did have some savings. But because I made more money than they said that I really wanted for financial aid, I didn't really get the package that I wanted.
Right.
So I can distinctly remember law school, they didn't want you to work your first year. But when I calculated, I needed to work beginning the second semester. And remember, I told you I been a reporter in high school, and I was on our wrote for our campus newspaper, Tuskegee, for 2 years. So I'm looking, and I gone to meet with the dean, and I said, listen, respectfully, I'm not asking if I can work. I'm telling you I need to work, and I've given up too much to be here. Mm-hmm. And so right outside the dean's office was the Florida Lawyer, the magazine for the law school. And I walked in there, and I said, do you have any positions available? And they had one for editing and that kind of thing, the paper. I mean, the magazine. Yeah. So I worked there the second semester of my first year. Came home that summer and worked 2 jobs. I can't even remember. I can't even remember what I worked that summer. But I remember working 2 jobs. Right. And then that second semester of my first year of law school, I also applied to be a hall director for the dorm. So the RAs report to the hall director, and that allowed me to have free housing, a reserved parking space on campus, and a meal allotment. Wow. So that was tremendous for me. And when I worked over the summer, I was able to help with the tuition. So I figured out a way to put myself through law school. And then the second summer, I clerked for a law firm. And then that helped me pay for the third year. And then I ended up working with that law firm when I graduated.
Wow. So you made it through with little or no debt?
No debt.
Wow. So after law school, you move back to Miami?
Moved back to Miami and practiced law, did commercial litigation. Interesting, because the law schools, when you're coming out, I knew I needed to work, right? But they're not helping you. You're not getting a job in anything but law. And I still didn't have a vision of what the business might look like or what the business was. And I thought, well, I can get some law experience because that still will help me. And I was a commercial litigator. And so I got to see all the things that went wrong in a contract.
All the things not to do.
All the things not to do, which is helpful, right? Yeah. Because then you may not always know all the elements that need to go in a contract, but you can see what should have been in it when you see the bad side of it,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I practiced law for 3 years, and then I got married to my high school sweetheart, and we had dated off and on for a number of years, for 12 or 14 years before we got married. And then he was doing his final year of residency in Louisiana, in New Orleans, and so I moved there for 10 months. Then he did a sports medicine fellowship at University of Florida. And so for that particular year, when I was looking for jobs, and initially looking for law jobs, there were a lot of personal injury, and that's not an area that I really ever wanted to practice.
Right.
And so at the University of Florida, there was a position for the director of the Institute of Black Culture that was available. And I applied for it. And one of the assistant deans at the law school was like, I don't know if you really want to do that. The person who had that job before you, it's like embezzled some dollars, and she's still they haven't found her yet. Mm. And I took it as a challenge. I said, this is an opportunity to rebuild. This is an opportunity to make this place great again.
Yeah.
And it was that challenge, and I love a good challenge. I'd spent that year building relationships with the Center for Latin American Studies, the College of Journalism, the Center for African Studies, so many partnerships. Honeywell Foundation, we put on some programs together looking at the relationship historically of blacks and Jews. And so it was just a very interesting and intriguing year. And then we left there and moved to South Carolina for a year before coming to Tallahassee in 1997. And I stayed home for 11 years with children. Yeah. Before starting my own law practice, doing business formation. But then when my father-in-law was dying of brain cancer, he didn't have a will. And I was introduced to an attorney who did estate planning and probate. And he said, I'm going to walk you through this. And I thought, wait, I stumbled into this. I said, this is something that I can really manage my time and be there for my kids, because at this juncture we have 4 kids. And so I started doing estate planning and probate for a time. And then when my parents were moving up here, because my mother had some health challenges, I stopped working because I said I love my community involvement. I was very involved with the community. I was on the McClay board, United Way board, trying to think, Children's Home Society board. Yeah. And then so I focused on helping my dad with my mom, kids, and my community service.
Okay. All right. I want to take a step back a little bit and talk about your time as a stay-at-home mom, 11 years, right, and doing that. And so what are your thoughts and memories about that time you had with your kids and fulfilling that role as a stay-at-home mom during that season of your life?
Sometimes it was hard, and I think sometimes people don't realize how difficult it can be to be a stay-at-home parent. But I enjoyed every minute of it with my children, and exposing them to things and having that time with them is priceless. I think in some instances, there is a disconnect between women who work and women who don't work. And I don't think it should be that way. I think that if you choose to or have to work, I respect you. And I think that if someone is able to stay home, that it should be mutual respect. I can tell you there were times, not here so much, but in South Carolina, in social settings, oh, you don't work. But I'm pretty confident in who I am and what I do. And I just sort of...
Anyone who'd said that had never stayed home with children for any length of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I think it was just a great time. And it was managing a household.
Yeah.
And I put that on my resume. CEO of the Rolle household, because that's what I did. I managed our household, including our children. And so that was my job.
Yeah. When my wife and I got married, and we have 6 kids, and some great advice my mom gave me was however you set up your life, whatever things you buy, whatever decision, like house or cars or whatever, don't put yourself in a position where you won't have options to, if Robin, my wife, wanted to stay home, or however we wanted to construct our family, don't make financial decisions when you're young that take those options off the table.
Well, I think I'll summarize, live at or below your means.
Right.
Right? So that, and I will tell you, when I was practicing law, there was a time, especially being a female at a large law firm back then, we didn't have the mentors that some of our male counterparts had. And I remember thinking to myself, I will never need a job again. Want? Yes. Need? No. And so to your point, living at or below your means affords you an opportunity to always have options.
Right.
And that is something that we tell our kids, always have options. Because you may get in a situation where it's a job that is taking away who you are. It's affecting your spirit. And if you're financially strapped, you stay there longer than you need to or what's best for you. So I agree, always have options.
Yeah, it's good advice. During that time, I read that you also led a Girl Scout troop. There's got to be some stories there.
So I was a Girl Scout
when
I was younger. And when we were going to, back then it was junior high, so I was a Girl Scout probably, and a Brownie, so 2nd through 6th grade. None of my friends were going on to stay in scouting, and I didn't really want to join a new troop with new people, so I stopped scouting. But I see the benefit in scouting, and I think it builds confidence and leadership in young girls. So when my daughter was in 1st grade, I looked into scouting, and I didn't know at that time, because when I was in Girl Scout, it started at Brownies. But, I'm sorry, when she was in kindergarten. They had daisies, and so daisies you can do it earlier. So we started a troop when she was in 1st grade, and I was their troop leader through 12th grade. So after I closed my practice and stayed home to help my dad with my mom and, just focus on my kids and maintain my community engagement, when the United Way position came up and I was asked, you should really consider applying for that position. And things had stabilized a bit with my dad and my mom. And I was on the board at the time, and I really, really loved the work of the organization. And so I remember thinking, and the girls were worried that I was going to stop being their troop leader because of this job. And true story, during my interview, when I was doing my due diligence, I was like, look, I'm my daughter's troop leader, and as long as they want me to be a troop leader, that's what I'm going to do. I'm committed to it. And it's like, you do what you have to do. This doesn't have you feel free.
Right. You're at the time you're a stay-at-home mom. You're very involved. You're serving on several boards. working a lot with Children's Home Society specifically, and then you've got all this going on and taking care of your parents. And then the United Way, like you talked about, the United Way opportunity came up. And that just wasn't just to be on the team. That was to be the CEO and to run a huge and important organization in our community. So what was that thought process, decision-making process like? Because that's a big shift in your life to take that on.
Yeah.
So walk us through that.
It was a big shift. And when I was first, a couple of people suggested that I consider applying. I was like, oh, no, I'm good. And then my husband said, you volunteer so much with them. Why don't you get paid for what you're doing? Why don't you try for it? I mean, it was true. And so I applied for it. If I remember correctly, I think there are 140-some applicants, and then they narrowed it down. And some of them, they were from around the country, and narrowed it down to 3. And then I was selected. And it was rewarding and challenging. And particularly when we underwent the strategic transformation and changing how we engage with the partner agencies. Because one of the things that, and I think anybody would agree with this, is that donors today are not the same as donors in the past. Donors today, and I think appropriately, want to see how their dollars are having an impact.
And we'll be right back. How I Got Here is sponsored by Barano Heating and Air Conditioning in Tallahassee. I've been friends with Patrick Barano since we met in a chamber leads group about 15 years ago. I'll admit that I pursued him pretty hard to be his marketing firm and eventually won him over. And the reason I wanted to work with him is that I was already a customer and I knew what kind of company he and his father before him had built. He cares about his customers, he cares about his team, and he cares about this community. I've experienced Barano Heating and Air when they installed a complete system replacement a few years ago, and I enjoy peace of mind and same-day service with my Total Comfort Service Agreement. I've also been behind the scenes at their office and seen firsthand the true character of this company, and that's why we're so proud to represent them. To learn more or to schedule an appointment online anytime, visit baranoac.com. They really always will be there for you. And now back to the show. And so you were at United Way, had an opportunity to run the Community Foundation of North Florida. I think most people are familiar with United Way. It's very public. People know about opportunities to give through work and individually and all that. But Community Foundation, people probably don't know as much about. So if you could just kind of give us an overview, what do you do there? What is the role of the Community Foundation in our community? And kind of what are your goals and vision for that organization? So
you're right. When we underwent a strategic planning process 3 years ago, and our consultant said, the good news is there's certainly name recognition, and everybody says, oh, they do great work. The bad news is they don't really know what you do, right? And so really what we do, the mission statement is to enhance the quality of life in a North Florida community through the promotion and support of charitable giving. Our vision is to illuminate the community needs while connecting donors to charitable causes they care about. So for many years, and there are 4 operating models for Community Foundation. There's the donor-centric, which is the traditional, more transactional. Donors make grant recommendations to us. We do our due diligence, and then we put those grants out to the nonprofits they want to support. There's fiscal agent, there's community leadership, and there's community impact. So over the last couple of years, we've been moving. We're going to always be in that donor-centric box because that's the core of who we are as an organization. But we've also started doing work in the other 3 boxes. For example, you may have seen this in the paper recently, but the Midtown Readers has started a Let's Read initiative. Mm-hmm. So we're the fiscal sponsor for them. So that's the fiscal agent box. And we're just venturing into that. That's the first step into that box, if you will, the operating model. Under the community impact, we started a small grant program, Helping Today, Shaping Tomorrow, $5,000 to 11 nonprofits each year. And, there was some question about, what about is $5,000 making a difference? $5,000 for a lot of nonprofits is a major donor.
Right.
And what we've said to these nonprofits, leverage this $5,000 to have an impact on the program that you're telling us about in whatever way you need for that program. And then we did partner with Prime Meridian Bank on a Share Your Story video challenge 10 nonprofits get $1,000 just to tell your story in 60 seconds or less. You don't need a professional video. How do you work with low to moderate income people? And now, and then the work that we've been doing with Hurricane Idalia, and now we've been getting some dollars in from donors for Hurricane Helene. That falls under community impact as well.
Okay.
Under community leadership, what we've looked at back in August of last year, we convened a panel of folks for education looking at the obstacles and opportunities for kindergarten readiness. Because, that's been a conversation in our community. So we had Sika Green with the Children's Services Council talking about some of the things that they're doing and will be doing. Dr. Michelle Gale with the Leon County Schools, Brittany Birkin with the Federal Reserve Bank, and Brooke Bruner with Leon County Early Learning Leon. And part of what Brooke does is to look at the early learning providers in our community to see what, are the kids really getting ready for kindergarten, if there's anything that they can do to help. So if there's an individual kid that needs extra help and that preschool can't help them, they will work to put that kid in a VBK program to help ensure that kid is ready for kindergarten. And one of the things that Michelle Gale is looking at, one of her roles is, what are some of the non-school issues that prevent kids from being ready for kindergarten? How do we help with that? Or some of the non-school issues that prevent kids from succeeding in school? Because some of these kids come to school with all kinds of issues and problems. And then with the Federal Reserve Bank, when I met, and I said, why are you all even interested in this space? Well, they're looking at workforce participation. What are some of the barriers to workforce participation? And access to child care is one of them. And so the convening is one of the things that we've done in the community leadership space with the arts nonprofits. When we found out that there was arts was defunded from the state budget, we convened arts organizations in our community, not just those that had pending grants, but others, because we wanted to see what are some of the opportunities and challenges that you all are facing. And we're now going to be working to tell their story in I don't know if you want to say a wish book or a book, if you will. Each nonprofit will have a page telling their story about what they do, how they enhance this community, and the support that they need.
Okay.
So that's community leadership. So we operate in a lot of different ways. And so for me, I want to see us continue to grow in those spaces because I think that it will enhance our impact in the community if we do.
Yeah. It's an interesting role to play.
Yes.
To encourage giving and generosity within the community, and then playing a role in how that's directly impacting agencies and recipients in the community.
And I think with the community leadership piece, honestly, the nonprofits are doing a tremendous amount of work, great work, but they alone can't have the impact that is needed in our community. Local government helps, and sometimes the state, but state and federal funding has not been the same if you talk to nonprofits, right?
Right.
And so now, how do we as individuals, families, and businesses step up to help with this work? And part of that is the convening and learning. Remember I said illuminate communities. Part of it is learning about what the needs are. I had a business person to say to me, I'm all about solutions. Get me in the room with people to talk about solutions, and that's where I want to help. Well, convening can do that, right? Convening, because there's great work being done, and some of it is collaborative, and there can be more opportunities for collaborative work. And I think when people start really seeing and understanding the work that's being done in our community, and maybe seeing how they might be able to play a role in that in a philanthropic way, I think we're going to start seeing more and more movement to make this community even stronger than it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's another piece in the puzzle, right?
That's right.
Well, great. Well, thanks for explaining all that and going through it with me. All right, you mentioned your husband, but I don't want to get through this without spending a little time because I know that he's part of your journey and part of your story. Dr. Gary Rolle, a very well-known and respected orthopedic surgeon here. So I know you said you met in high school?
Yes.
So tell me about how did you meet? What were the circumstances and how you met in high school?
10th grade English.
Okay. That's it, right?
And we became best friends. And our senior year, we both said, well, we're going off to school. I'm not dating anybody, and he's not. We're just going to hang out as friends, And we were all in the same friendship. We were in the same friendship group anyway.
Right.
I mean, he had his own, because he played football and basketball in high school, so he had some of those friends as well. But when we did co-ed things, we were all in the same friendship circle. And so then we started hanging out, and next thing you know, it's like you wake up one day, and I can't even remember. I think we both knew at the same moment, like it was more than a friendship. And it's our senior year. It's like, oh, darn. Here we said we were going to date anybody. Here we are dating. And we dated off and on. It was off and on.
We've kind of been dating. We didn't even realize
it. Guys that I dated and some of his girlfriends, like, I know there's more going on. We're like, no, we're just friends.
Right.
I said, he's like a brother to me. And, we were just really, really were good friends. And I think that's a great foundation for marriage, because we just celebrated 30 years of marriage recently. Yeah. And then he went first to West Point for a semester, and then he transferred to University of Florida. And again, as I was at Tuskegee. And so we were really never in the same city for a while until my first year of law school, which was his last year of med school, because he took 5 years to get out of med school because he played professional football. And University of Florida, one of the things I'm a former UF alumni president, the Alumni Association president. I'm a law school trustee. I sit on the Athletic Association board, very committed to the university. But one of the things I liked about what they did back then, and I can't speak for right now, but if you were an athlete and you were a good student and you wanted to continue your education, they were going to support you in whatever way they could. So they allowed for him to go to med school in the off season from pro ball. Mm. So he did that for 2 seasons or a season and a half. And so anyway, we got married after that. So when he got a call we were living in South Carolina that 1 year, but he always wanted to be in Florida and wanted to take care of a school about the size of FAMU. But I was a Miami girl, and I didn't want to live in Tallahassee. This was never on my radar, honestly.
Right.
So when he got a call from some of the partners, they all retired now, that he knew from med school days, and they wanted him to come take a look at TOC and consider even taking care of FAMU. And I was like, well, I don't want to live there. And he's like, well, honey, let's just kind of go take a look. And when we got here, I felt like it was going to be a great opportunity for him at TOC. So we moved here. And it has been an amazing opportunity to raise our family.
How long did it take for you to warm up to Tallahassee?
I will tell you, our oldest, who is going to be, he's 27 now, he was 2, and it was an incident. TOC has an office in Perry, and Gary had gone to Perry this particular day to work, and he was staying to watch the first part of a middle school game of one of their employees. And he called to tell me he was on his way. And about 20 minutes later, I get a call from a highway patrolman saying, this is Officer so-and-so. I'm with your husband. He's been in an accident. Mm. And he wants you to take your son to the neighbor and then go to TMH because he'll be there soon. And I'm not registering, right? I'm now robotic because I'm the one out of my siblings that I'm the one that does well in crisis situations. But I'm getting a call from a highway patrolman saying, your husband said he's all right, but this is what we want you to do. So anyway, I take my son to our neighbor. I get to TMH. Nobody wants to talk to me because I'm a doctor's wife. And then one of his partners comes in, and I was like, tell me what's going on. I mean, he says, I hit a helicopter. He said, that's probably them bringing him in right now.
Oh, my gosh.
And so ends up that there was a woman who decided she wanted to commit suicide and started gunning it and hit his car. Car flipped several times, hit a tree. He was fine, and I was just like, it was just a whirlwind of activity. But we were still relatively new to this community at the time, and there were so many people signing up to bring us dinners. He had gone back to work, and I'm like, no, please, we're okay. Insisted on continuing to help, and it was that sense of community. I used to tear up whenever I say this. I'm pretty proud of myself right now. But it was that sense of community that I had never experienced before.
Right.
And that's when I knew this was a place that I wanted to be to raise my family. And I have never regretted it.
Wow. What a powerful story. That's amazing. Yeah, well, obviously you're fond of the community as measured by your involvement over the years, and that's very cool. And I have been in the waiting room at TOC, and I just had to laugh because this part isn't funny, but my wife had ankle surgery, and I was waiting. She was in surgery. I was waiting for the doctor to come out and talk to me, and your husband came out to talk to some people. And it was like I don't know, some rock star had come in, and everybody was just so happy to see him, and he was just so good with the patients. And I'm like, I can see why people love him so much, because he was just so good with everybody and just so caring and, really connected to them.
He's a true people person. He really is. And he takes a lot of time. And so for that reason, he's a keeper.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm glad that's good. All right. So really before I ask the last couple questions, you're really involved, continue to be involved in addition to, you're obviously involved through your work, but also in your volunteer time with TMH, Economic Club of Florida, and of course you mentioned all your connections with University of Florida. So how do you prioritize, decide how you're going to still be involved in your limited time availability, and what does that still mean to you to still give back in those different ways?
So I think it's a gift that I'm a good manager of my time, and I don't say yes unless I feel like I can do it. And don't get me wrong, there are times when weeks are crazier than I would want them to be, but I'm also a morning person, so if I need to get up at 4 in the morning to do some things, I will do that. TMH, the reason I said yes to that is because this health community has been a part of our journey, my and my husband's journey, and I believe in what TMH is to this community, right? And so it's just, and it's a busy board. You serve on 3 committees in addition to the board meeting, but the impact that we have in the community spoke to me in a powerful way, because I was trying to say, I'm going to say no to different boards, but that is one board I was not going to say no to. The Economic Club of Florida, when I discovered this club when I was working at United Way, and I really love the speakers that we bring in. They're speakers that you would not normally hear, often national speakers, some statewide, and topics that are just very interesting. Yesterday we had the Assistant Secretary of the Navy to speak to us. And so, like anything, I was a consistent member attending, and then I was asked what I consider being on the board. And I was like, and the first thing I always ask, what's the time and the financial commitment? I always ask, because you will never see me sit on a board and not work.
Right.
That's just not who I am.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I can do this. And then I was asked to be an officer, and now I'm currently the president of the club through December, and then I'll be the chair of the board. And it's just a great group of leaders that we work with. And, as president, and we have the head table, we ask members to sit. And the bios of some of the people in our community, we have some amazing people in this community. And I got to have more time to meet with these people to learn their stories. Like you're learning my story.
Right.
There's so many stories I want to learn. Like, how did you get here?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. As we look at the sign.
Listen.
But that honestly was one of the motivations for doing the podcast, is Tallahassee is just this collection of incredibly interesting people. And a lot of people don't know a lot about them and their journey. So let me ask you this. I know you're fulfilled in the work you're doing. Do you still have any itch to have that business at any point, do you think, in the future?
No, because I really think I was called to run a business, because I had my own law firm, and it was small. It was just me. I had a law intern 1 year, and so I got that checked off my box. But I do think that I think that, honestly, that my blessing is being able to run a business that ties in with my passion to the community, and the United Way and the Economic Club of Florida have done that for me.
Yeah.
So I don't have an itch to do anything else other than I want to spend more time at the beach looking at water and being relaxed by that.
Sure.
But no, I am completely fulfilled at this juncture.
Oh, great. All right, final 2 questions. Katrina, looking back, what is the one thing or person that has changed or altered the trajectory of your life to this point?
I think that I had a fifth, and she's my 5th and 6th grade teacher who, from my recollection, was the first teacher to really believe in me and see leadership potential in me that I didn't know existed. The student government sponsor, and both of these folks are deceased, at Miami Carroll City, was another who exposed me to all types of leadership opportunities, including writing that article for the paper every week.
Yeah.
And so, but I just really think it's life experiences, honestly. And I'm very happy that I have a husband who supports what I do. My parents were always very supportive of what I did. So I can't name one person or thing, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's a series of people or events. Yeah. All right, final question. This podcast is named How I Got Here. So we've talked about how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
There are some things I really want to see happen at the Community Foundation, particularly in the community impact and community leadership operating model. And stay tuned for some things. We have some opportunities that we'll be announcing pretty soon that we'll be working for the benefit of the community. So to grow that organization even more, I think that's what's next for me in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.